Today we have the pleasure of sitting with Mona Roy in our LexLcal. So what made you want to run for school committee?
Well, I've been involved in a lot of initiatives in town, including around education for decades now. So both at the local and state level, I've been involved with CPAC for a number of years. I know the school committee very well. I've been watching these meetings for decades. And for a while, I was the liaison from CPAC to the school committee. So I used to ask questions there. And then later on, I was chair of the Human Rights Committee, where I ended up also working with the school committee. So I'm aware of a lot of education issues. Certainly, that's something that's deeply important to me. And then at the state level, I've drafted education legislation. So that's something, so it makes sense that I would.
That makes sense.
As opposed to maybe not the planning board, not the select board.
Right. So what, in your past, what other positions did you have in life that created this for you?
Well, in terms of, so professionally, I have an engineering background. I'm an attorney now, but in terms of Lexington, I sound very much like other people. I was on the PTAs, I was a volunteer, right. I've been on task force. I don't even remember what I've done. I've been around. I was chair of the Human Rights Committee. I'm still chair of the Lex 250. So it's just ongoing. Almost wrapping it up. Yeah. But so I've had a lot of roles in town. Certainly, I was the co-chair of the Indian Americans of Lexington Ed Subcommittee. So I've just been around. Yeah. I don't even remember. I'd have to look back. Is there
something major that you would like to change? What do you feel is your role going to be on the school committee?
Well, my first role is to listen and learn. As much as I've watched the school committee meetings, as kind as my colleagues will be, as much as I know them, it's one thing to be on this side of the mic. It's another thing to be at the table. And I'll really have to think about where I can be productive. I'm on record as saying I hope to really prioritize respectful two-way communication. I think post-pandemic, it's been a little challenging. And I want to make sure that, because I know the school system, I know the folks who are working, teachers, our administrators, everyone's working very hard. But at the same time, sometimes there's a disconnect with the public as to what's happening, why decisions are made. I have that engineering background, so I tend to think in systems. So I keep using this term, and I don't know if people understand me or just pretend to, but documented decision rationale, where if we're going to make a decision, why did we make it? And then I was talking to Mark Sandine about this, again, from an engineering point of view, a control system where we can look back and adjust to see if things didn't go as we thought.
What else do you want to talk about as far as the school committee?
I was just inaugurated, so I now learned, although I do this already, there's a lot of reading, I think what I would like for the people to know is the school committee meetings are not nearly all the work of the school committee. Most of the work of any committee, but definitely the school committee, is done outside of those meetings. And I think that's something that's very tricky for someone to understand if they don't know, that a school committee meeting is really for colleagues to discuss in public, because it's a public body. So they can't have people always say, why can't they do this on their own? Because they can't. That would not be legal. So that's something I would like the public to know, that school committee meetings are about discussing issues in public, and a lot of what's done outside of the school committee meetings, in addition to being liaisons to other boards and committees, is really reading, digesting, synthesizing a lot of material, a lot.
I imagine that's quite a bit, right? So, financials.
And also just other stuff, just a lot of reports. Reports are very large. I think the recent SPED audit was 67 pages. That's a lot. And I'm lucky that I'm not worried about. That is a subject I know very well. So I was able to do that. But there are going to be subjects where I'm less familiar. And so I will have to really dig down and learn and understand those documents productively.
Yeah, I know. Do you think there's a perfect background to being on the school committee? I feel like it's just more people who care, right? And then they learn about what needs to be done in the schools.
I would say yes and no. So I think firstly, the school committee is 5 people. So it's good to have a mix of people. Everyone has, I think, a different skill set. I think that's important, different lived experience, but also different skill sets. So I think that's helpful to the body at large. I also do feel strongly about this, that you have to have some experience. You can't show up to the school committee and say, well, what's time on learning? There's some basic vocabulary that you need to know, or you need to understand the difference between days of how many days going to school versus time of learning versus the impact of half days, just something even small like that. Understand that when we talk about teachers unions, what does that mean? When we talk about civil rights, how does that work in terms of schools? For special education, for example, we have legal obligations. So there's there are a myriad of issues that I think would be very overwhelming to someone who hadn't been studying it. That doesn't mean that anybody, of course, anybody who's a citizen can run within the town, but I would recommend anybody who's looking to be on school committee in the future to really start the work of learning it. And I also recommend, to the extent possible, that people be on town meeting. I think that's an important step to really understanding a little bit about town finances.
That makes sense. Because our school is our biggest financial member, right? That's where we spend our money.
As we should, because ultimately this is a legal obligation. I think that's where it's a little tricky for people to understand that we have to educate students. So when we have a student with special needs, severe needs, anything, or even our student that's here that changes, that we certainly have to provide them an education. At the same time, we're Lexington. We want to make sure that we have and continue to maintain and strive towards even better our education system. We are an excellent school system. We're really lucky to live here. I didn't grow up in a town like this, so I did not. So, I mean, the children who go to Lexington public schools are very fortunate, but you asked earlier what my role would be. Probably my role would be to highlight where we could do better. That's kind of the nature of who I am.
Thanks. Well, I appreciate your time. It was very nice.
It's wonderful to see you again, too. And thank you again for your support with Lex 250 and VO 250. We really appreciate it.
Oh, of course. My pleasure.